Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. My name is Brian Jewell. I am your host, and as we approach this Thanksgiving holiday, I am filled with gratitude that you have decided to spend some of your time with us again this week. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to make that investment of your time worthwhile. And today we are going to do that through a fabulous and fascinating conversation with the one and only Bruce Poon Tip of G Adventures. If you don't know Bruce, he is a visionary in the tourism space. Many of the things that we all enjoy today in terms of community impact when we travel around the world are things that Bruce thought of 30 years ago. And we're going to talk today about his vision for how people all over the world can use tourism to uplift communities and make the world a better place for everyone. You are not going to want to miss that. Before we get there, though, let's talk about some travel news you may have missed. Now, in the past few weeks, all eyes have been on election results. And while many of you have been busy watching the returns for congressional races or gubernatorial races around the country, you may have missed some interesting results from a ballot initiative that showed up in many communities throughout Colorado. Numerous Colorado communities voted to divert some hospitality tax from tourism promotion to fund local initiatives. Now, ballot measures to increase lodging tax were passed in Estes Park, Glenwood Springs, Dillon, and a number of other places and counties throughout Colorado. Now, similar measures failed to pass in Grand Junction, Centennial, and Hudson, among other places. So municipalities that passed this tax increase plan to use these funds to fund affordable housing and other community projects in their cities. Estes Park, for example, is the most popular destination that passed the initiative. And there, the city will levy an additional 3.5% lodging tax on top of the existing lodging tax that has already been in place for some time. The local DMO, Visit Estes Park, supported the initiative, and 63% of voters voted in favor of the measure. So it turned out to be quite popular there in Estes Park, winning by quite a wide margin. Now, this was all possible thanks to a new law passed by the Colorado legislature and signed by the governor, which allows municipalities to let their voters decide how to allocate as much as 90% of lodging tax proceeds in their municipalities. Now, so far, it looks like these voters have decided not to take money from existing lodging taxes and divert it, but rather to increase taxes so that they can do some things around the community in addition to continuing to fund tourism. Interesting development, interesting idea. We'll see if it catches on in other destinations around the country and how it impacts travel and tourism promotion. Next up is our road tip segment. This is a part of every episode where we share some things that we have picked up from our time on the road and the many friends of ours that we know who work in tourism that could help make your travel experience a little bit better. Today's road tip comes courtesy of my friend Elaine. Hi, Elaine. She shared a very interesting approach to how she prepares her morning coffee in hotel rooms that I thought I would share with you. Now, full disclosure here, I don't drink coffee because, it tastes like rancid dirt water, but I understand that it's popular and that many of you can't imagine starting your day without it. And if that's you, you might benefit from hearing what Elaine does when she travels. Now, Elaine has been a tour director for decades. She's very involved in travel. She's on the road a lot. And what she told me on a recent trip is that she does not use the in-room coffee in her hotel rooms. She doesn't use the coffee maker. She doesn't use the little K-cups. She doesn't use whatever they provide for a variety of reasons that I guess make sense if you're a coffee drinker. She has some concerns about the taste. She has some concerns about how it works. She may not feel like it is clean. I understand all of that. So what Elaine does instead is she packs in her suitcase a small portable coffee maker. Now, this is a super cool device. It is made of that kind of silicone rubbery material. So this coffee pot actually collapses flat to be stored easily in a suitcase. It has a built-in electric heating unit. So when she's ready to make her coffee, she pulls out this portable coffee maker, expands it, fills it with water, and adds her coffee grounds, plugs it in, and before you know it, her coffee is ready. It's exactly the kind of coffee she wants to drink. She doesn't have to depend on the hotel's machinery, the hotel's coffee brand. She doesn't have to go downstairs to the coffee shop and spend $8 on a fancy brew. She gets exactly what she wants. So if you are a coffee drinker, if you can't imagine starting your day without it, I think that's a pretty cool idea. And since this piece of equipment collapses into something that's maybe only an inch or so tall, you can probably find room for it in your carry-on. So that is the tip of the week. Coffee drinkers, don't say I never did anything for you, because this might just change your life on the road. Next up, I want to share some news from us. We are hard at work on the Go South Travel Planner that will appear in the January issue of the Group Travel Leader magazine. Now, it's no surprise, the South is one of the most popular tourism regions around the country. Groups love going there, and there is always an abundance of new things to write about, to showcase, to talk about in the American South. If you plan travel for groups, if you are interested in going anywhere from Kentucky to Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Virginia, West Virginia, anywhere in the South, well, this is going to be an indispensable resource for you as you plan group trips there in 2023 and beyond. Now, if you don't already subscribe to the Group Travel Leader, well, I've got good news. You can subscribe absolutely free on our website. That is grouptravelleader.com. I'll also link to that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. You can subscribe there, and if you do that today, you will be on the mailing list in time to get the January issue of the magazine in your mailbox, or if you prefer, simply in your email inbox. And of course, you'll also get all the other fantastic resources that we provide to group travel planners throughout the year. Now, if you promote travel, maybe at a CVB or a tour company, and you would like to be part of the Go South Travel Planner, well, you can make that happen by calling our sales department. That is Kyle and Bryce. You can reach them at 888-253-0455. They will tell you all about how we can make sure you are part of the Go South Travel Planner in January. Now, it is almost time to get into our conversation with Bruce Poon Tip. Before we do, though, I want to encourage you to hang around to the end of the interview, because at the end, I'm going to return to this idea about tourism destinations pulling funding from lodging tax and applying it to other things. I have some thoughts about that trend. I'm going to share them in today's Hot Minute. You won't want to miss that. We'll be right back with Bruce Poon Tip. All right, everybody. My guest today is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and the founder of G Adventures, an award-winning small group adventure travel company operating more than 750 tours in 100 countries. His work with nonprofits, like-minded companies, and indigenous people has led to more than 100 community development projects being supported globally, meaning 90% of travelers on a G Adventures tour visit a social enterprise project. He is Bruce Poon Tip. Bruce, welcome to the podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. You have one of the most unique origin stories in tourism, certainly that I've ever heard. So I would love for you to take our readers and listeners back to that backpacking trip so long ago that really changed your life. Tell us what that trip was and what happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, first you have to, I guess, look at the time. So this is going back to 1989 and 1990. So travel is very different. How people research travel, how people book travel, how people actually traveled. In those days, you had a choice between a mainstream holiday or you went backpacking. You got a guidebook and went backpacking on your own. And so that's what I did. I got a guidebook and I went out on the road. And it was during that time that I realized, that there was opportunities. I had my eureka moment, I guess, as an entrepreneur. I didn't necessarily want to backpack, but I had no choice. If I didn't want to, do a compound resort or a bus tour or a cruise, which were the only opportunities at that stage to travel, you'd have to backpack and organize everything on your own. And I thought there's just there's a blue ocean there in the middle of young professionals with disposable income and time that want more culturally focused, cultural immersion type experiences, which is what backpacking kind of offered, but organized and comfortable. And it was while I was on the road that I had that moment where I met a lot of people on the road, and there was this, everyone was kind of in limbo in this space in the middle of, mainstream and the backpacker. I just visualized that there would be a market there.
Yeah. And so you met all these people and you came home, obviously probably inspired by the trip, because travel is almost always inspiring on its own. But you also came home inspired by the people you met and the potential market you saw. So I know you kind of went out on a limb. You took some big risks. Tell us about that process of turning it from I see some potential to I'm starting a company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was very grassroots and, guerrilla marketing to start. So, I put some tours together, the concept together. It was kind of an organized backpacking, if you would. I got friends that were going to actually be my first tour leaders, that were going to be the first people to guide the trips. I just started doing talks everywhere. I went to schools and, colleges and travel schools and universities. And I used to talk at outdoor stores, outdoor clothing stores. I had long-standing kind of, different nights a week. I would speak at different outdoor clothing stores, and they would advertise through the week. And I would spend my week kind of getting people to come and see these talks, because it was really revolutionary what we were doing, because no one had ever heard of this kind of travel. When you tried to sell someone a tour to Thailand, they visualize that as a coach tour. And what we were doing is using local transportation, local accommodations, family-run accommodations, small-scale accommodations, and it was going to be a much richer, grassroots type of experience. And so so I had to get in front of people to explain to them, what we were doing. And I got my first 6 people to sign up for one of our programs. To Ecuador was our first trip. And, a friend of mine kind of took a leave of absence from his job. And but that was really it. So, and then we got our first groups off in, 1990, like late 90 and into 1991. And more, they told their friends, and I got invited to more and more colleges because people were starting to hear about, and it was a lot of tourism colleges and travel programs in colleges and universities. And they were interested to learn more about it and in the summer take trips. And so that's how it started.
So I imagine you had a goal in mind, or maybe a couple of goals in mind. So, I think about what the company does today, and you have, very cornerstone principles in terms of sustainability and, responsible tourism, economic development. Were those things all on your radar already back in 1990, or did you have kind of a much more limited vision?
Yeah, it was a much more limited vision, I have to say. I mean, I wish I could say that I was that forward thinking, but the idea of an entrepreneur didn't even exist. Like, people didn't throw around the word entrepreneur back then. Like, we didn't have 27-year-old billionaires,
right?
And so, so the idea that I was starting my own business was already in itself somewhat of a renegade thing to do. And so so the whole concept really was always, like, when I think back at it, we always were really, there was always this community dialogue and community development. And it was really in our 3rd or 4th year, it was like 93, 94, and maybe even 1995, when we first heard the term ecotourism. And people started to suddenly identify us with ecotourism, but we didn't identify with ecotourism because we were so focused on culture and people at that stage, whereas ecotourism was really focused on environment. And so that's when the two things started to merge. And then from that came responsible travel, then sustainable tourism, and that side of tourism where, being actually caring about the destinations, whether it's through environment and through planet protection or cultural heritage preservation or poverty alleviation. All these things started coming together, and tourism could be a way to alleviate poverty. And people thought, like, this is, it's a revolutionary thing. Like, no one ever thought of that. I just want to go on holidays. And the traditional holiday was a week on the beach. I just pay so I can eat and drink as much as I want for a week. And suddenly we were asking for people to want more out of their holiday. And that was the change. And so we started first doing our first community project work in 1996. That's when we partnered with Conservation International and organizations like Rainforest Alliance, the Ford Foundation. These organizations, I spoke at the UN that year for the first time. And so so the idea started kind of grow, and we were kind of still lumped in that ecotourism definition.
Mm-hmm.
But I had very strict orders on all of our people that we never mention ecotourism in any literature, because we didn't really identify it with it exclusively, because we were really focused on people and cultures.
Yeah.
Because we were creating relationships with local communities. And it just over time, as we became successful, they became successful. And for the first time, we saw, the evolution of, social enterprise and poverty alleviation right before our eyes. We were the first ones creating a relationship with communities, creating a dialogue with communities, and making sure all, services were fair trade services. People were being paid in hand for services, as opposed to going through some kind of local operator paying slave wages out to local people. And as we grew, there was an invested interest, and it was the first elements of kind of community tourism, where everyone would rise as we became successful.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to help me unpack that. And let me throw out a scenario that I think could be typical for a lot of North Americans who are not deeply invested in travel, who don't think about travel the way you and I do every day. They say, okay, well, I would like to take that trip to Thailand, let's say. And there are a half dozen companies that I can do that with. And if I do that, I'm going to stay in some hotels, and I'm going to eat in some restaurants, and I'm going to have a few guided tours, and, people all along the way, locals are going to make some money from me being there. So, what is that person missing? How is their vision limited in that traditional mindset compared to a much more community focused tour paradigm?
Well, it's really to do with how you book it, or with the operators that you use. It just takes a little bit of extra, asking questions about where your money's going, and companies should know where their money's going. If they can't answer those questions, that they're not doing very much. Or if they're just donating to a big traditional NGO, you travel with us and we're given to UNICEF. I mean, that's great, but it really isn't creating community development and community tourism. And local people aren't benefiting from you being there immediately. Or if, if they're kind of connected to these, big organizations, then you can be more suspicious that, where is your money going? Where's the ownership of this business? And are they truly taking those things into consideration? Because, some companies are now saying they're, carbon neutral. This is so important, but how are they really doing that? Like, if you're just calling a consultant who's just kind of, figuring out your carbon emissions to allow you to make a mess here, as long as they're like investing in some kind of carbon offset here, kind of balances the earth. Like, those kind of things are not, it's not science, and everyone has to kind of just ask questions and do whatever they feels comfortable for them. So for some people, that's enough. But for some people, when they ask questions and they actually go with a company that actually has impact and has a positive impact, and it's kind of an intrinsic part of their business model.
Yeah, no, that's really important. So I'd love for you to take us to one of the 100 countries where you guys are operating right now. Pick a country, pick a community that you love to go to with your travelers, and tell us about some of the impact you're making in the community and the intentional effort that has gone into creating and sustaining those relationships.
Yeah, okay, that's an amazing question that I've never been asked for before, Brian. So thank you for asking it, because I'll just step you through. I can just look at India, for instance. India is a good example. So when you arrive in India, we have a program called Women on Wheels. Women on Wheels works with marginalized women who are in shelters. We give them an 18-month training program. And at the end of their graduation, they learn how to drive and they get a car. Nothing empowers women more than mobility. So they get a car and they do all of our arrival transfers when you arrive in India. So Women on Wheels, and these women are all single mothers, and they were in shelters prior, and they've been through the program, and they're now chauffeurs and drivers for all of our arrival transfers. That's number one. So day two, your first day is a city tour. And every company has a city tour on day one. But years ago, we formed we work with Salem Black Trust, which is Street Kids Home. And the street kids are trying to repurpose their lives, learn to speak English because they're going for scholarships to study. And we have a high success rate of these kids that are, at 5 are found in the streets, and at 14, 15, 16, we're able to, put them in this our city tour program. There's an amazing training program, and all of our city tours are done by the Salem Black Trust street kids. And through that, they learn English. It's a cultural, and they get to show you the city from their view, their eyes. It's an amazing experience. So you might go for dinner at Kitchen with a Cause, which is a G Values Fund project that we invested with ex employees of ours that were CEOs for many years, and instead of retiring, we want to keep the people with us. They started a business, and Kitchen with a Cause actually hires a lot of the street kids from Silent Black Trust, puts them through a 2-year training program working in a kitchen, and we have 100% employment of food and beverage on the other side in the hospitality industry on the other side. But it's a constant rotating training program. All of our groups come in there for lunch, dinners, and the whole kitchens are run by through the Street Kids program, and they get jobs on the other end in hospitality. And we have many different projects like that. We have different experiences you can do with different G Values Fund programs we have, like with a local NGO. Mm-hmm. like our Oodles of Noodles program, which is in Vietnam, where again, it's a Street Kids program, it's a training kitchen program, it's an employment program, but our groups go in and spend the afternoon at a market, shop for fresh ingredients, come back to a cooking school where the kids teach you how to make lunch with noodles. You make fresh noodles, fresh pot of noodles seasoned, and that's another one of our many projects that we have. So. And then we have them all over the world. I mean, in Africa, there's one of my favorite ones is, we have these African safari vehicles with young people. It's our 18 to 30 something. And they go on 50-day tours across Africa.
Wow.
And laundry service is a big thing. And we work with local women in communities where we stop, instead of paying a laundromat or a laundry company in a hotel, which is just mindless or unconscious, we can work with the local community that does laundry for our customers, and it supports the entire community and employs women at the same time, doing laundry for our customers who are our young customers on these long overland Africa trips who need laundry done periodically, and we can create community projects around these kind of services.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I kind of can see some people, even domestically, who maybe run domestic small group tours in their city. Maybe they're a local receptive or something like that. I can see them hearing this and saying, that's amazing. I would love to see something like that in Birmingham, Alabama, Vancouver, take your pick. But they say, you have built very deep relationships, and it's not just, you didn't just show up and develop product, but you really developed relationships. So how does
creating community? That's how we look at it.
Yeah. So give us some practical steps for doing that wherever you are, finding those opportunities to really help lift people up through tourism, because it's not, you can't just Google that, right?
No, I mean, it is about, and I always say, when you create relationships, if you never want to work, the first off is negotiation of a relationship, right? And I always tell people, if you never want to see someone again, you make a great deal. If you're going to work with someone as a partnership, you make a good deal. So you talk about fairness, equality, and that everyone is, because we're as tour operators, we're too focused on, and our customers are too focused on price, to a point where we nail down these prices and we screw down the prices so much that there's nothing for the suppliers in the end. And so they start cutting on their end, and that starts going to local wages, local people, and all those savings that you get when you buy discounted programs all gets pushed down locally. So that's the first thing. Creating those relationships where everyone wins. And that's not common when you go into business school. When you go into these negotiation classes, it's about getting the upper hand in a conversation, getting upper hand in negotiation. But when you're creating community and you're creating dialogue and you're creating partnerships and long-term relationships, the first thing is that mindset of everyone winning, everyone, and truly understanding it, and being compassionate in business is really important. The only other thing that I kind of recommend to people all the time is know your customer next. So many times people create products for themselves, things that they would like, but know where your customer is coming from. And so I did a consulting project for a government agency in the Ozarks. And so the Ozarks have a huge, business for people within 10-kilometer radius that live in the region, that go to the Ozarks on the weekend. Yeah. But how do they build a product for a German market? How do they build a program for a Canadian market, Japanese market, an Asian market in general? And they're not, the local communities there, they don't even understand that. They don't even understand that's an opportunity. So the first thing is knowing the potential of your market, and know your market and create products for the potential of your market, not just your immediate market or for yourself. Because people generally make products when they first start out of things that they would like. But think about it for, if you want to attract Australians or, as I said, Asians, Europeans to come, that potential is there. And that also includes doing your research against your competitors, price points, all of those kind of things, knowing what market you're going after. Are you mid-market? Are you luxury? And if you are, what is your competitor? What are your competing price points? Mm-hmm. And from there, use all the creativity in the world, but know the framework that you're starting with at first.
So you brought up price, and I think that's something that people often think about when this tour paradigm comes up, because the group tour market has been very price sensitive for a long time.
Yeah.
And so,
especially now, it's more so at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to imagine that this very mindful, conscious way of traveling costs a bit more, maybe quite a bit more than, your standard off the rack tour package. Am I wrong in that? Or is that something that your customers accept and are happy with?
It's our goal to not cost more. I mean, sometimes, and we don't cost more. And that's why we're successful globally at what we do. And we only achieve that through volume. So G Adventures is the largest in the world. So we were able to actually offer a much more sustainable and responsible program. You're right, though. The customer wants all of that, and it's not free. Now we were able to achieve that. We're probably the closest in the world when it comes to matching, those price points, just because of sheer volume. But it is our goal at G Adventures. We try our hardest, and we don't always achieve it. Like sometimes it is a little bit more expensive to do what we do, especially when you take into, all of our Ripple score, all of our, welfare guidelines. Now the sustainable side of the Earth programs that we're putting in to match the Scotland Declaration, which we signed. That stuff doesn't come free, and it's sometimes a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't have to be a lot. And it just has to become more regular, and more people have to do it as the demand increases. So there's a little bit of responsibility on the customer, because when there's more demand, we all have to do it, and then the price comes down.
So speaking of demand is crazy in travel right now in general. It was starting to get crazy even before the pandemic. We were having conversations about overtourism. As an organization that operates in a lot of places with a lot of tours, how are you confronting issues of overtourism, and what do you see G Adventures' role in solving that problem should be?
Yeah, another great question. This is a great interview.
Thanks.
Well, I'll tell you that overtourism was a buzzword prior to, and so I was much more concerned about it because everyone focused on Venice or Pyramids of Egypt or Machu Picchu, and really those issues are problems, but they're very different problems because those destinations are no longer tourism destinations. They're run closer to theme parks, right? Venice now charges an entry fee to enter Venice.
Yeah.
So it's the Pyramids of Egypt, the same thing. You line up in rows like these rows of people to get into a pyramid, just like you would a ride at Disney.
Yeah.
And so these destinations have very different challenges in terms of volume, but they're also set up to move millions of passengers through them. And so like the Louvre in France, in Paris, I mean these destinations are run very differently. And when we talk about over tourism, no one's talking about there's an overall push in the world to go more and more remote. People are wanting to go more and more remote, especially in this wired world that we live in. More and more people want to disconnect. And so that's the threat of over-tourism to me, because no one is looking at when you're going to visit like more fragile communities, a group of 50 could be over-tourism, right? A group of 50 coming every Tuesday and Thursday to a small community that spends money at these communities. Suddenly, kids are not going to school those days. And suddenly they're making, spending time instead of studying, are making crafts to sell tourists. And suddenly you see social impact and cultural impact because, they're not going to school. And that goes on a bigger scale in cruise ships. So you have Anguilla, which has a population of 9,000 people, and a ship could come with 6,000 people.
Yeah.
Can almost double the population for 8 hours. People could spend over $100,000. That ship can spend over $100,000 in that area at our pier, and suddenly kids aren't going to school on the days they're ships, and you're having that kind of cultural. So over-tourism is a very complex issue, and it has to be looked at all sides. And so, so I'm in conversations with many different, so in terms of what we do about it, we have very little impact because our groups are so small, but we're involved in the conversation. I'm involved in many conversations, offering my time with many organizations, whether it's local tourism authorities or global tourism associations, about how we tackle it and how we define it in the future. What I do is I'm trying to get out to the world and to the tourism industry about how we define what over-tourism is, right? And how it is a bigger problem than we think, but it's not necessarily these highly scaled destinations that aren't really tourism destinations anymore. They're theme parks. Like the Great Wall of China is a theme park. You have an entry fee, you pay for, you have a guide on. It's not like a fragile community where people are going in to see, where you can really have impact. And so we have to expand that spectrum of how we define success solving this problem.
So in 1989, 1990, you saw a future in tourism that didn't exist yet, and you have proven that concept. I wonder if you can polish up that crystal ball again and try to look another 10, 20 years into the future. Where do you think travel is headed? Where do you think the traveler is headed? And what are some things that we can do as an industry to try to move toward that vision in a positive and sustainable way?
It's another great question, but, and it's never been clearer than right now. If you'd have asked me this question pre-corona, I wouldn't have had a very clear answer. I'd have made something up, but I wouldn't have a clear. But, it's so much clearer right now that we've been through this pandemic, and, the travel industry is almost we've been forced into the startup mode because we were all forced to go into hibernation. We have to restart our businesses. And so we're all looking now is how the power dynamic is going to reshuffle because the customer is going to be different. That's the best thing that could ever happen to us as a travel industry. So what I see is in the future is that people will travel longer and deeper. The flight shaming that was going on just before, and carbon emissions and all that was happening. Greta Thunberg and all that was going on just before the pandemic. So people were already questioning, why travel, and all of those things kind of came to a head with the pandemic. And we have a carnal desire to explore, like it's in us as human beings. Yeah. And I think that, but the idea of taking, 3 holidays a year, 1 week, 1 week on the beach holidays is not as popular, is not going to be as popular in the future. Taking these, junket trips for 5-day cruises or whatever, people are going to be more, there's going to be inherent risk in the future because coronavirus is not going away. Right. We're learning to live with it, which is what we should do. So if you're going to travel now, it's because it's important to you. And if it's important to you, you're going to be more meaningful, and they'll be purposeful on why you want to travel and where you're going to go. Because just before the pandemic, people didn't care where they went. They bought amenities. It was about buying, 10 restaurants to choose from, Broadway shows, indoor zip lining. There was a race to the bottom on amenities and entertainment, and the destination was no longer relevant. And I think that the destination becomes very relevant to people in the future. And instead of people going for a 5-day or a 1-week trip, stay 2 weeks or 3 weeks and go deep and really see the country and travel around, stay longer and deeper, I keep saying. It won't be everyone. There's always going to be a mainstream market, but that market is so huge. It just takes a small part of the way people look at travel to change, to have a massive change on the landscape of our industry.
So in addition to running a tour company, you have found time to author a couple of books, and you just released a documentary film. Tell us about The Last Tourist, what it's about, and where people can find it.
Oh, thank you. The Last Tourist was a labor of love. It started off as just we've been working on it for 5 years. It started off as just like, because we have a whole content department, maybe we could just film a documentary about our story, but with iPhones, and just edit something very quick ourselves. And it wasn't like, and it was just more documentary short for our own purposes. But then, we decided we should get a director because it was a bigger story. And then when the director came on, it turned out like, let's take G Adventures out of it. This is a whole industry. And so G Adventures is never even mentioned in the film. And it just becomes a story about the potential of travel. Then Corona hit, and now it's become such a meaningful film to people. And it's about the potential of travel. I mean, there's some harsh realities on where travel was and is. But the overall message of The Last Tourist is a message of hope, of how tourism can truly be a transformational industry where anyone who touches, it's not just a one-way conversation where I buy a luxury holiday and I demand service. with all the comforts of home when I travel to a foreign country. It's more so a community approach to travel where everyone benefits and everyone shares in the fact that you are traveling, and everyone's lives are changed by the mere decision to go on holidays. And so, so it's, we just actually finished our kind of pay-per-view, and now it's available in the States on Hulu and all kind of other streamers and in Canada. Everyone can see it. And if you want to just go to Apple TV, you can rent it anytime. And, you're supporting a great movement, and a lot of people, this is not a for-profit kind of thing. There's not a ton of money being made. With The Last Tourist, it's definitely a labor of love. No return on investment on that project. I'll just say that right now. And there's so many people that benefit from the message in it. So, go take a look at it. It's a great film. It's doing amazing too. It's surpassed all of our distributors' projections for the film.
Yeah, fantastic. So if people want to follow you online or learn more about the company, where are the best places for them to do that?
Thanks for asking again. So gadventures.com is obviously for the company. We have many different social sites, whether it's Facebook or Instagram. For me personally, I'm Bruce Poon Tip, so I'm only on Instagram and Twitter. I'm not on Facebook, but very active there in terms of posting, what I do. But G Adventures has, we have 18 to 30 something channel on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. They have them all for G Adventures.
Yeah, and
you can join, or you can just go to gadventures.com.
Yeah, wonderful. So we have a few questions we ask everybody before we let them go, and these are low-key just for fun, so you can shoot from the hip. Number one, do you select a window seat or an aisle seat?
Window.
Yeah.
Because I sleep. I sleep and I lean up, so I sleep amazingly on planes. I've learned, I've evolved into a plane sleeper. Yeah. So I have to have a window, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So what's one thing in your carry-on that you would never travel without?
I always travel with a full prescription for teeth. So in case dental is a big issue because if you have to wake up with a toothache anywhere in the world, you need dental. So I have like antibiotics, I have painkillers, and I renew those. I renew those prescriptions every year, and I always carry them. And you'd be shocked at how many times I've had to use them. Not for myself. Yeah, I've never had to use them in my 30 years of traveling. I've never had a toothache on the road. But I use them all the time because someone else has a toothache and they just need to, maintain the pain until they can get to a proper dentist, depending on where you are in the world, and not wanting to rely on local dental care. And you have, and you just wake up with pain. So it seems every year that I renew my subscription, it's been used, but it's because I found someone along the way that needed it. Yeah. But I always carry those kind of things. Also, quite a pharmacy of medications for dysentery and all these kind of sleeping and all these kind of things that you need. Yeah, that I don't think you find in anyone else's pack. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So, if you had a free airline pass and nothing else to do for a week, where would you head next? At the moment, Japan. I've got a calling for Japan because Japan was the trip that was canceled, which I haven't gone back to. Was when I was going when the pandemic hit. And I was going specifically to see a international sumo wrestling championship. Wow. Because recently the Mongolians have been winning the national championships. And of course the Japanese think their sport is being stolen. So there's quite a controversy in the sumo wrestling community, which I don't actually know anything about, but it's just another fascinating cultural experience going to a championship. And I had tickets to go to Japan. But my desire is to do that. But also, I've been to Japan numerous times, but I want to see rural Japan. My goal is to get out of this into the farming communities and fishing villages and see rural Japan, which I have a new in-moment fascination for right now. So that's where I'd go if you asked me today. Oh, yeah. Wonderful. So last question. What is something you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could experience again with somebody you love? Wow, that's a huge question. I would have to say I saw so many things before I had kids, right? And so I've returned to many things with kids. But, you're asking for a thing, but can I say a place? Yeah, sure. Namibia. So I've spent I'm in love with Namibia and I love that country. It's got everything. It's got the coast, the skeleton coast. It's got the dunes, those beautiful sand dunes. Plus it's got safaring in Etosha Game Reserve. I just think it's just such a diverse, beautiful country, peaceful country too. and doesn't have a lot of the same kind of, some countries in Africa that have political issues. It's a German history, German settlement, interesting German influence there. Fascinating country, and I love it. And I've been there numerous times, but it's somewhere where I'd love to show people that I love of how beautiful it is, because it's so unknown.
Yeah, wow, that's wonderful. Bruce Poon Tip, this has been fantastic. I could keep going for another hour. We're going to let you go, but thanks for being with us, and I hope you'll join us again sometime soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I'll be here anytime you ask.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, everybody, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with the amazing and insightful Bruce Poon Tip. I know I certainly did. He gave me a lot to think about. So I want to recap some of the most insightful things that he shared to make sure that you don't miss them and you can continue thinking about them and implementing them as you plan and promote and lead your trips. One of the things that Bruce said was that companies should know where their money is going, and you should ask questions about the impact companies have when you are planning travel. It's easy to think that when you travel to a new country, a new community, a new destination, that the money that you're spending there is directly impacting locals who live and work there. And to some degree, that's true. But if you begin looking into who owns what in travel, you would be surprised to find out how many hotel companies or tour companies or other significant travel vendors are owned by multinational corporations, companies outside the destination where they're actually serving you. And if you're looking to maximize the impact of your travel dollar, well, that might not be the way you want to go. So ask your travel partners where the money's going. And if they can't answer, well, that probably tells you they're not invested in value-based community impact tourism, perhaps the way that you're looking for. Another thing Bruce said was that if you're never going to see somebody again, you make a great deal. If you want to work with somebody as a partner, though, you make a good deal. Now, he went on to say that as tour operators and customers, we're so focused on price that there's nothing left for the suppliers in the end. And so even if you are traveling with impact in mind and you're trying to make sure your travel dollars reach the workers in the communities you visit, if you are one of these people that is so fixated on getting the best price, well, there's not going to be much of that money left to make a positive impact on the lives of the people working there. And I think this is something that, well, if I'm honest, I have probably been guilty of in the past. And I would say that many people in the tourism industry have been guilty of. It's no secret that group tours especially have long been considered a value proposition. And many people take group tours because they perceive them as being more affordable than other modes of travel. Well, maybe it's time that we as an industry began to change that paradigm. And instead of looking for how we can provide the lowest price to our customers, we find out how we can provide the best experience and, in doing so, make the most positive impact on the places we're visiting. Finally, Bruce said that in the future, people are going to travel longer and deeper. He said, we have a carnal desire to explore. It's in us as human beings. And he said, if you're going to travel now, it's because it's important to you and you are going to be more purposeful. Now, I think in light of the pandemic and a couple of years that people spent at home not doing anything, that is the case indeed. And I think we can capitalize on that as an industry, not only to get back to where we need to be in terms of sales and volume, but also to make sure that the experiences we're providing are deep and meaningful, and we're not just taking people someplace where they can have a drink and an ice cream, go to a show, buy a t-shirt, and check something off their bucket list. The world is vast and full of huge and amazing travel opportunities, but we as leaders in tourism have to be the ones to unearth them. Great stuff there from Bruce Poon Tip. Now, before we wrap up the show today, I want to return to this idea from Colorado about municipalities voting to use some tourism tax to accomplish local initiatives. Now, since that seems to have taken hold in Colorado, we will probably see it continue to spread throughout the country. I'm not sure it's the best idea. That is the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the segment of the show where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered views on an issue impacting travel every day. Now, today we're going to talk about the impact of taxation on travel. So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. Here's the problem with increasing tourism taxes. Even if you're planning to use the money for good things around your city, every dollar that you add to a hotel guest's bill at the end of their stay makes your destination that much more unaffordable. And it's ironic that these destinations are probably using some of these fundings for affordable housing and other initiatives that they view as decreasing inequality locally. But by increasing taxes to do it, they are actually contributing to inequality in the travel industry. You see, there are some destinations, Colorado is certainly among them, that are becoming so unaffordable through inflation, through taxation, through demand, that they're basically inaccessible to anyone below, let's say, the upper middle class. Now, I don't think that's wise. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's in the best interest of travel. And ultimately, I don't think it's in the best interest of the world. That's the way I see it. You are welcome to disagree with me, of course, and we will still be friends. Disagree, agree, doesn't matter. We would love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@grouptravelleader.com with your thoughts or questions. I read every email that comes into that address, and you never know, your idea or question or comment might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And hey, while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a favor? Go to your podcast player of choice, give us a rating, leave us a review. It's a tremendous help, and you have my thanks. My thanks as well to Bruce Poon Tip for joining us. Now, on the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to bring you a conversation with Christopher Elliott, who is a consumer advocate and the author of the Travel Troubleshooter column that you see in newspapers all around the country. It's going to be a great conversation. You won't want to miss that. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together. So let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Danya Simmons is our creative director. Ashley Ricks is our circulation manager and graphic designer. Our sales team is Kyle Anderson and Bryce Wilson. To advertise on the podcast, call Kyle or Bryce at 888-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information about our magazines, podcasts, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com.